Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dear colleagues, I rise today to speak on the motion of Senator Lankin that proposes that a study be undertaken by the Standing Senate Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology about the future of workers in Canada, particularly in the context of the gig economy. Over 3 months ago, I had written a speech about this, but we hadn't been started to deal with COVID-19. At the time, we couldn't imagine just how different our lives would be as a result of this virus, our personal lives, our work, our institutions, but how we looked at what normal life is. In light of the last few months, it seems even more important to me now than ever that real action be taken to respond to the growing concerns of the workplace, the labor force, and workers in precarious employment. I want to look at these concerns with regard to a sector who has rarely a platform in the Senate, that is arts, culture, and the cultural industries. This includes artists of color, immigrants, self-employed workers, people that the Senator wishes special attention to be paid to in the scope of this study. Throughout my career as an artist and cultural manager, I've always been interested in issues related to the status of the artist and the conditions of the precarious work that many artists and cultural managers are subject to. Within the Acadian Association of Professional Artists of New Brunswick, with whom I had the pleasure of working for over a decade, I worked on the conception and creation of public policy models that would allow artists and cultural workers to be fully recognized. As a professional musician for many decades, I was very familiar with this reality of living from contract to contract, or as you say in that world, from one gig to the next. So perhaps you know this already, but the gig economy comes, or the expression comes from the music sector, according to Oxford Music Online, and I quote, gig,
commonly applied to a music engagement of one night's duration only. Fin de la citation.
End of quote. In reading this definition, obviously, I saw my life, but I also recognized that a vast majority of my former artist and cultural worker colleagues here and elsewhere had lived their passion and their art in a situation of precarity. Canada has over 158,000 artists, 726,000 cultural workers. That category includes heritage, culture, and artists. And although I don't have specific data on the workers in the gig economy, according to the 2016 census, 52% of artists were self-employed. When we talk about precarity, here's what I can tell you. The average, or rather the median income of an artist in 2016 was $24,300, but for the rest of the working population, it was $43,500. This is 44% less than the median income of the rest of Canada's workers. So this reality is due to a number of factors, in particular the failure to recognize the invisible work done by workers in the artistic and cultural sectors. This notion in this sector refers to all the work in terms of research, preparation, exploration, artistic development, the ideation and the design that occurs as you're working towards an artistic project. Unfortunately, this work is not paid. And this can no doubt be applied to many other kinds of jobs, but it illustrates the failure of our public policies to adapt to how the market changes in the cultural sector. People in this sector have atypical jobs, I recognize that, but their jobs should be protected and have a framework like other sectors of employment in Canada. Here are some of the risks for the cultural and artistic workers that were identified in a forum on the professional status of artists that was done in 2013, as well as in a report by the Cultural Sector Human Resources Council entitled Information on the Labor Market in the Cultural Sector 2019. These risks include the following realities: the lack of benefits, income instability, lack of training, expectations that artists should do volunteer work, the need to be multi-talented, and little job security. We can add to this technological advances that have hard hit the cultural sector, according to a recent Yale report. And the lack of labor and the globalization of markets has had a concrete impact on this category of workers. Many of these risks have also been identified by the cultural businesses as affecting significantly their ability to attract labor. I was quite moved by a passage in the report by the Cultural Sector Human Resources Council about the consultations that they led with key partners in the arts and culture sector, and I want to quote. Almost all the individuals interviewed mentioned the mentality of poor person in the Canadian cultural sector. This mentality is shown or demonstrated through low salaries that are provided, the lack of social benefits for most employees. There's no retirement package, no health insurance, etc., and the limited interest in Canadians in paying artists the real value for their work. People, in fact, complain that they have to pay for the preparation that an artist does before they have a show. All of these difficulties affect all aspects of an artist's lives and are not limited to income insecurity and food insecurity, their ability to have access to affordable housing, and their physical and mental well-being. Today, as we start to open up our societies again, we're discovering the impact of the pandemic on all of society, including that of arts and culture, particularly theater, music, and dance. COVID-19 has made us aware of a number of these concerns. It's now impossible to ignore the importance not only of starting to think about it, but also taking concrete action to protect workers in this gig economy. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the notion of precarity has taken on real meaning. It's not just a risk or an abstract concept. On the contrary, it has impacted all workers in the arts and culture sector. Everybody is suffering from the consequences of the lack of benefits, employment security, income instability. No one is safe. We recognize that the federal government has made efforts to listen to the workers in the arts and culture sector since the beginning of the crisis. The extension of the CERB is an example, as the Prime Minister's announcement showed, or short-term emergency measures, and that will continue to be available to this sector to deal with the issues being experienced by the arts and culture sector in Canada. We often hear public and, or rather provincial and federal elected officials say that artists have to reinvent themselves in the context of the pandemic, and this is quite troubling because it gives the perception that these representatives don't really understand the nature of art itself. It is something that artists constantly do, that is reinvent themselves. They do this daily in how they look at the world and how they express it. And in recognizing that artists are creative and resilient and that they are capable of reinventing themselves, they alone cannot bear the consequences of the pandemic on their sector. They need concrete assistance from us. The study proposed by Senator Lankin would give us the opportunity to reflect together the future of workers and to identify measures that would allow us to provide the conditions for dignified employment for all Canadians. It would allow us to propose legislative solutions to improve the social safety net for all workers in precarious employment. No doubt we won't get all the answers we need as a result of this study, but in our own way we will contribute to strengthening the rights of workers, to ensuring a better future, and to putting an end to this idea of poverty when we think about the cultural sector. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the leadership of my colleagues and senators. Since I've come to the Senate, I have been delighted to listen to the senator's inquiry, Senator Delmar, on employment in the 21st century in a globalized economy, that of Senator Poirier on seasonal work, and the recent speech by Senator Lankin, to name just a few, along with many other speeches that have attracted our attention on these crucial issues. On behalf of all the workers in the country, I humbly thank you for your work, and I thank you for listening.